I work nights because nights don't ask questions. That's what I used to tell people when they asked why I'd been on the graveyard shift at the municipal water treatment facility for almost 12 years. It sounded clever, a little poetic even. The truth was simpler and uglier. Nights are when fewer people are around to notice things going wrong, and I was good at not noticing things. The facility sat 3 miles outside town, just past the last stretch of the residential road where the streetlights thinned out and the asphalt started cracking. If you drove far enough, you'd see the low concrete buildings huddled together like they were ashamed of what they did for a living. Water came in dirty, water went out clean. That was the story everyone liked. I worked in Control Room B. It was smaller than A, older, and had been scheduled for renovation for as long as I'd been employed there. The monitors hummed constantly, each one showing numbers that mattered deeply to someone, I assume. Somewhere out there. Chlorine levels, pressure, flow rate, pH balance, all of it updated every 30 seconds, ticking forward like a heartbeat you stop paying attention to once you're sure it's still there. My shifts ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Every night followed the same rhythm. I'd badge in at 9:47, hang my coat on the same hook, pour burnt coffee into a chipped mug, and sit down in the same chair that leans slightly to the left. At 10:15, I'd do my first manual check. At midnight, another, and finally at 3 a.m. The one everyone hated because that's when mistakes happened. And I logged everything. That was my real job, logging stuff. Every fluctuation, every alert, every override, time, date, initials. The logbooks were thick, heavy things with laminated covers, stacked neatly in a locked cabinet. Digital backups existed, of course, but management trusted paper more, so paper felt permanent. Honest, maybe? For years, the logs were boring. Comfortably boring. Then sometimes in late October after the temperature dropped, but before the first snow, I noticed the first inconsistency. It was small, so small I almost didn't bring it up to myself. 1:42 a.m., the chlorine levels in one of the secondary holding tanks dipped just below acceptable range. Not dangerously, not like alarm-worthy, just low. I adjusted it, logged the adjustment, moved on. At 1:44 a.m., the system showed the same dip again. That didn't make sense. The system didn't react that fast. Chemicals needed time to disperse. Physics, not opinion. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, feeling vaguely embarrassed, like I caught myself making a rookie mistake after a decade on the job. I corrected it again, logged it again. 1:46 a.m., it happened a third time. This time, I checked the physical gauge in the adjacent room. It matched the screen. The water really was losing chlorine actively, persistently, like something was consuming it. I reported it that morning in the handover. The day supervisor frowned, nodded, and said they'd keep an eye on it. That phrase is designed to end conversations. The next night, the same thing happened. Same tank, same time window, same quiet incremental drain, always between 1:40 and 2. Always correcting itself by 2:05 like nothing had happened. I started checking out older logs, and that's when I found entries that weren't mine. Same issue, same tank, going back months, logged by different operators. Different handwriting. Same neutral language. Minor fluctuation, corrected. What bothered me wasn't the problem. It was the consistency. Problems vary, mistakes spike, equipment degrades unevenly. But this was precise. Routine. Like an appointment. I brought it up again. This time the supervisor sighed and said, "We don't escalate unless it breaches threshold." "Why that tank?" I asked. He shrugged. "Old infrastructure." That should have satisfied me. It would have once, but after that conversation, things started feeling staged. The cameras, for instance. Every hallway, Every access point had cameras feeding into Control Room A, but Control Room B, mine, only had partial access. One corridor camera consistently went offline between 1:30 and 2 a.m. IT said it was interference. Maintenance said it wasn't worth fixing until the renovations. I began writing notes in the margins of the logbook. Questions mostly. Observations. The kind of things you don't officially log because they don't have a checkbox. On November 12th, during that same time window, I heard something I couldn't log at all. Footsteps. Not echoes, not settling metal. Footsteps with weight, cadence, intention. They moved along the corridor outside Control Room B, paused, and then continued towards the restricted access wing. No badge swipe registered. I stood up, the chair creaked loudly in the silence, and the footsteps stopped. I waited a full minute before sitting back down. At 2:01 a.m., chlorine's level normalized. I didn't sleep after that shift. Over the next week, I noticed other things. The water temperature in that tank rose slightly during the dip. Organic compound readings increased, then vanished. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to suggest presence. I started staying late after my shift, pretending to catch up on paperwork. At 6:20 a.m., I followed the maintenance corridor to the restricted wing. That area had been sealed off officially. Structural concerns. In practice, it was just unused old filtration systems. Decommissioned equipment. A place everyone agreed not to remember too hard. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the smell hit me first. Not rot, not sewage, something cleaner. Metallic, like a hospital room scrubbed too clean or too often. The tank was there, the one from the logs, smaller than I expected. Modified, piped separately from the main flow. There were scratch marks along the interior access hatch. Human-sized scratch marks. That's when I understood the logs weren't records. They were camouflage. I confronted my supervisor that night, told him everything, the timing, the footsteps, the tank. He didn't deny it. He just asked how detailed my logs had been. When I told him about the margin notes, his face changed. Not to anger, not to fear. Disappointment. "You weren't supposed to add commentary," he said quietly. Then he explained. Years ago, there'd been contamination, human error. A technician flushed waste improperly, people got sick, one died even. Lawsuits would have shut the facility down. The town needed water. So they solved the problem internally. They used people. People without records, people who wouldn't be missed. The tank wasn't for water treatment. It was for processing. Human bodies neutralize certain contaminants better than chemicals. Slowly, painfully, but effectively. The chlorine dips weren't malfunctions. They were being consumed. "Why nights?" I asked. He looked at me like the answer was obvious. Fewer questions. I resigned the next morning. They didn't stop me. 3 months later, the town issued a boil water advisory. Unrelated, they said. Temporary. I still have copies of the logs. I read them sometimes. Not for proof. To remind myself how easy it was to write something down and call it routine.